Okay, we're on Daf Mem Amid Aleph at the top of the Amid. So we've had a concept yesterday that when it comes to tzitzis, tchelas is always wool. That's what tchelas is. It's dyed wool. If you're wearing a linen beged, you're allowed to put tchelas into the beged, even though that shan is, as we had yesterday, aseh is doichal lois aseh. Now, as we're going to see right now, this is not so pashut. Beis Shammai disagreed. So Tan Rabbanan sadin betzitzis. If you have a linen beged, or do you put tchelas on the linen beged? Beis Shammai poitrin. By the way, poiter doesn't just imply poiter; it's aser. Beis Shammai holds there is no heter for shatnez, meaning Beis Shammai does not darshan the smuchim of gedilim tasalcha next to shatnez leisil b'shanes. He disagrees. There is no heter. Aseh is not say you're not allowed to put klayim on tzitzis. You're not allowed to. There's no heter. Beis Hillel mechaymin. Beis Hillel is the one who says that if you have a linen beged, you could put tchelas on the linen beged. This is Beis Hillel, not Beis Shammai. So far, so good. What we're going to be dealing with most of today's daf is the following premise. Beis Hillel holds you're allowed to take a linen beged and put wool strings on it. That's Beis Hillel shita. Here was the problem. Nobody did that. In Yerushalayim, if you were to do this, everyone would look at you funny, which implies that it was sort of unheard of to do this. And the question is, why? If Beis Hillel taka mekel, why is it so strange? And what we're going to try to figure out today's daf is basically there's an underlying theme that although it's mutter min haTorah, and it's even a mitzvah to do it, Chazal basically said, no, not a good idea. And the question is, why? That's basically, again, nowadays, it's bechalal not going to be done because we don't have tchelas. So the mitzvah is incomplete. And as we'll see, once you don't have tchelas, we still have to address why is it not, it's still a mitzvah, right? No one would say that a talis is not a mitzvah. It's still a mitzvah. It's still a mitzvah. So why? We'll get to that in today's daf. But the point is, even though Beis Hillel holds you're allowed to and you're mechuyev, there was an underlying concept of just don't do it. And the question is, why? Yeah, no, but why would there be creation of a minig keneged the halacha of Beis Hillel? Obviously, this minig was not made by Amaratzim. This is obviously a minig based the Rabbanim. And the question is, why were the Rabbanim so against putting wool on a linen beged? So says the Gemara, Amir Rev Elazar bar of Tzadik, haloi kol amatel tchelas b'Yerushalayim. And the problem is that in Yerushalayim, if you were to take a linen beged and put tchelas on it, ein elam matmiyim, people would think you're crazy. So Rev Elazar said it must be we don't pass it like Beis Hillel, which by the way is already a strange thing. We don't pass it like Beis Hillel. So the question is, why in Yerushalayim, if I were to put tchelas on my linen beged, everyone would think I'm nuts. Why? So says the Gemara, Amir Rabbi, im kain lama asrua. It must be that Chazal asered it. Meaning, although aseh is doichal lois aseh, like Beis Hillel, still practically the Rabbanan said don't do this. And the question is why? So says the Gemara, lefi she'ein bekim. Attempt number one to explain this is maris ayin. People don't know that they see, the average person just sees a linen beged with wool, and they're going to say, wool and linen is not so bad. So that's the first reason. So although it's technically mutter and a mitzvah, Chazal basically said to do, which by the way, is Chazal asering something that's a mitzvah. This is an example of Chazal basically preventing you from doing a mitzvah b'sheval tasa. And Chazal basically say, if you have a linen beged, don't put tzitzis on it. Is a mitzvah min haTorah, and by the way, potentially daled kanfis, all those issues, don't do it. Why? Because even though it's a mitzvah, the average person is just going to look and say, wool and linen? I guess it's not such a big deal. So we're going to have to try to figure out whether this sticks. So that's attempt number one. So says the Gemara, Amarle Rava bar of Chana Rava, lirmi be'asar of enafkalu shukim afaris l'milsa. Well, if you want people to know it's a thing, so get 10 rabbis to put linen beged with tcheles strings, let them walk into the marketplace, meaning let big Rabbanim wear it, and everyone will know. Well, if big Rabbanim are wearing it, then it must. So says the Gemara, Kol shekain d'misra mehillah. No, you'll make it more confusing. We're trying. If you're worried about people getting confused, making more. Listen, how many times do people have a linen beged? Probably statistically lower. Okay, so we're afraid that the one time that people have it, and it's shatnez, people are going to get confused and be like, "Well, linen." They're not going to know that it's heter for tzitzis. They're going to say, "Okay, well, linen is fine." So says the Gemara, so get 10 people to start going out in the street wearing it. Send shluchim to the street. So says the Gemara, it's going to be more confusing. That's the problem. It's like when you want something to be known when it's a little confusing, the more you publicize it, the more of a percentage of a chance that people are going to be confused because now more eyes are on it. So says the Gemara, okay, lijajib b'pirka. So send out a kol kaira, let Rabbanim get up every Shabbos and let them publicly declare it's mutter to put tcheles on a linen beged. So says the Gemara. So attempt number one of why they don't do it is because of confusion. The problem with the confusion thing is that tell people. Okay, so attempt. Yeah.
Is there a thing that Marasign doesn't apply it? Someone just.
I told you that was a sheet of Rav Moshe Feinstein. I was thinking about this as I was saying. Rav Moshe sheet is the Marasign does not apply by ignorance. Great question. Unless it's not ignorance, people won't know that it's tzitzis. They'll just see wool and linen, not realizing that it's tzitzis. I don't know. You know what? It's a great question. I was actually thinking about that Rav Moshe as I was doing this. So let's go to attempt number 2. The Gemara's attempt number 2 is the reason why they outlawed wool and linen for tzitzis is the Gemara says, Gezer Mishum Kala Ilan. Kala Ilan was the counterfeit, which, by the way, is one of the issues with the psil. I'm not into the nutchelis, just on a personal note. I'll tell you why. I'm not anyone who has an opinion about anything. When I first looked into the sugya, I listened to shiurim from Rabbi Reisman, and he was so convincing that I'm just like my nitiyas, I'm not into it. But one of the facts, and you'll read about it, one of the sources about it is they found like shells of the murex. The problem with that, and Rabbi Reisman pointed out, relying on any type of data like that is an issue because in the times of the Gemara, there was a major counterfeiting business for fake tcheles called kala ilan. Kala ilan was indigo. It was a very similar color to tcheles, but instead of made from a kosher fish, whatever the fish was, it was made from flowers. It was a fake. It was a fake Rolex, Bekitzer. It was a counterfeit.
There's 2 good pages on it.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. So the point is, so here's the issue. The reason why we don't let people put wool and linen beged for tzitzis, why? Is because what if someone uses kala ilan? Meaning, it's only a mitzvah if you're using real tcheles. If you're not using real tcheles, you're just basically dipping it into ink. It's nothing. So then you're putting on asay derech without the proper asay, meaning it's not a mitzvah anymore. Okay, now the Gemara says, here's the quick question. Okay, I get it. Counterfeit tcheles is no good. Let me ask you a question. I don't have tcheles. We don't have tcheles anymore. Let's assume that it's not until Mashiach comes like this. All right, fine. I don't have it. Kitzur. If I were to wear wool and linen, I think everyone would be like, don't do that. Don't do that. Let me ask you, why not? Is this not a mitzvah? It's a mitzvah. Now you're going to say, I don't have tcheles. Okay, but is this not a mitzvah? It's 100% a mitzvah. You kiss it, it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah in a Torah. So why can't I put this on a linen beged? You can say, well, I say the chalosah say only applies with tcheles. Why? It's a mitzvah. So the Gemara is going to explain. It's just a side shaila. Meaning, we're afraid that if we allow them to put tcheles, what if the tcheles is fake? And then it's not going to be a seder chalosah. The question is, but why not? Even with fake tcheles, it's still tzitzis. You're right. It's maybe the wrong color. Okay, but it's still wool. It's still tzitzis. Like, it's asulahem tzitzis. Like, why not? So the Gemara explains very simply, and that is, asay is only doichalois asay when you have no choice. You see, when you have a linen beged, why not just pull linen strings on it? The answer is because tcheles means wool. So by definition, you need to put on a klayim when you're trying to fulfill mitzvah. But if it's not actually tcheles, then it's avoidable. And then I should be wearing linen. I mean, the reason why I cannot practically nowadays put wool strings on a linen beged is because it's unnecessary. You only need wool when it's tcheles. If it's not tcheles, you can wear linen strings. So why are you doing asay d'chalesis? Asay d'chalesis is only allowed when there's no alternative. And therefore, when you're not doing proper tcheles, there is an alternative, it goes back to being usher. So therefore, the concern is that if it's fake tcheles, so it's not tcheles, it's like akin to tzitzis nowadays, then there's no heter asay d'chalesis, because what are you putting on wool for? Tcheles is wool. If it's not tcheles, it doesn't have to be wool.
Yesterday you were saying it was a darabanan.
What do you mean?
Without tcheles, it becomes the mitzvah of darabanan.
It's not the Rabbanan. No, it's not the Rabbanan. It's Doraisa, but it's avoidable. Again, tcheles is wool. If it's not tcheles, it doesn't have to be wool. So for me to put wool strings on a linen beged, it is a mitzvah. But asay d'chalesis doesn't just apply to mitzvahs. It applies to mitzvahs where there's no alternative. If there is an alternative, then there is no asay d'chalesis. So it is a mitzvah, but it's an avoidable mitzvah. And that's why we're afraid in the times of Chazal, they didn't want to let with real tcheles because they were afraid, what about counterfeit? And counterfeit is it's avoidable now. Because it's not, you're not makayim the mitzvah tcheles, you don't need wool. So says the Gemara, because if it's not tcheles, you could actually use linen. Loi, then you lose the heter. Kidrish Lakish, as Rish Lakish says, Damar Rish Lakish Kamakum Shata Maitzah say Veloisa say V'im Atu Yochel Kaim Shnei Muta V'im Lav Yavei say V'yidchas Loisa say. Rish Lakish said Asay is only Doichel Loisa say when there's no alternative. But if there's an alternative, then we don't have a Seder Chalesa. So back to the original point, why is it that they do not allow wool and linen nowadays, in the times of the Gemara in Yerushalayim? So the answer number one is because we're afraid, what if it's counterfeit? So says the Gemara, V'livdike. So why not do this? Very simple. Go to the vat, okay, take a string, dip it in, and check if it's Kala Ilan. Meaning, you're going to outlaw all Tcheles on a linen beged because of the concern of counterfeit, so just check for counterfeit. Say, before you put it on, make a new declaration. Before you put it on, you have to check. Okay. There was ways to check it, by the way. They would put it during certain dyes, certain soaps, certain heat. You were able to tell whether it was a counterfeit. So instead of just throwing out the baby with the bathwater and say, just don't put tchelas on, why not do this? Say, you're only allowed to put wool tchelas on a linen beged if you first check it. V'lipdike. So says the Gemara, El Gezerah Mishum Te'ima. A new concern. I'll tell you why. Okay, it's very interesting. Here's the concern. I take the string, I got to check it first. Right? So I take a random string and I just dip it in. Okay? And then I check to see if it's Kala Ilan. It turns out it's not Kala Ilan. It turns legit Tcheles. Great. Here's the problem. Can I use that string that was the tester string? No. Because it has to be dyed L'Shem Mitzvah. And that was dyed L'Shem Test. So the fear is like this. If we allow Tcheles, then there's a concern of counterfeit. To deal with the counterfeit, we'll have to make you test it first. The concern with testing is you'll take a string, put it into test, which is not l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. You'll then say, oh, I passed the test. I'll use said string, because it's expensive, and then you'll put on puzzle tzitzis. That's a concern. Okay? Because again, it's like a domino effect. I'm afraid of counterfeit, which requires me to check it. Part of the checking is dipping strings into the thing to see if it looks good. The problem is then I'll have to discard those strings because it wasn't dyed l'shem mitzvah tzitzis, or assuming it wasn't dyed l'shem mitzvah, it was dyed l'shem testing. And now the problem is that if we allow it, we're afraid you're actually going to use that string, which is not a mitzvah, on a linen beged, and it's not a seder chalesaseh.
If it's kosher,
I don't know why.
We do stuff like that all the time.
I don't know why. The Gemara never thinks about that option of just say, before you dye it, say, I'm doing it. The answer is, I guess, because you're not. You're doing it l'shem test. You're not doing it. I don't know. But no, because I guess it has to be 100% l'shma, maybe. I don't know. So says the Gemara, okay. So the Gemara says, I have another. So just send out letters to everyone saying, test it first, but don't use the tested string. Just, write a letter, write a letter and send it out to all the people that are making tzitzis that you have to test it first before you put it on linen beged because you have to make sure it's not counterfeit, but don't use the tested string because they're not l'shem tzitzis. Okay. So says the Gemara, well, you're going to rely on pashkavilin? You're going to rely on papers? Who reads papers? No one's going to read this. Says the Gemara, whoa, wait a minute. Go for it.
The dyeing of the string, right? So because you did it as a test.
Yeah.
And we're only doing this in case you're wearing it on a linen beged. But if I'm wearing it on a regular beged, it's not linen. It's the same issue.
It is an issue, but it's not as big of an issue because you're not shanas. You just don't have tchelas. You're right. Yes, by the way, every time you test it, there is a concern that if you use that, you just won't have the full mitzvah. The reason why if you hear it's worse is because you're putting it on linen. So, okay, the point is, says the Gemara, to send out a letter saying that if you test it, you can't use that string. The problem is, says the Gemara, who's going to read letters? Says the Gemara, whoa, Amar Rabbi, go to the next page. Chametz bepesach v'yam kippurim dekaris samchina diska hacha da'asei ba'alma loikol sheken. Wait a minute. We rely on letters for big stuff. Let me ask you a question. How do they know when Pesach was? Right? If I'm living in Syria, okay, in beautiful Turkey, wonderful Yemen, and I want to know whether Adar was in Iber, okay, and if Adar is 2 days or 1 day, or Nisan is 1 day or 2 days, you know what it does? It affects Pesach. And how would I know? They would send letters out. So I'm relying on letters for when Yom Kippur is. I'm relying on letters for when Pesach is. You don't think I could rely on a letter for the testing for Aseido Chalosa? What are we talking about? So the Gemara says, okay, you know what? New point. Okay, we're trying to figure out why in Yerushalayim did the Rabbanim of Yerushalayim outlaw putting wool tcheles on a linen beged. So we thought it was a counterfeit. The Gemara has exhausted that. The Gemara says a new approach. El Amar Rava, Hamilsa Amra v'itmar ma'Rava Shemder Zera Kavasi. You're not going to like this. Shema Yikare Sadinoi b'toich shalish v'yitfarenu v'tera Amra Tasav Lemin Asim. Okay, here's the concern. I have a full tzitzis. I have a full tcheles. I have a full tcheles beged. Not tzitzis. I have a full tcheles beged. The fourth corner rips off. Okay? It rips off. So, I have full tcheles, everything, full beged with tzitzis, everything's great. The entire fourth corner rips off. All right? I sew it up to fix it. Now, that needle and thread that I'm using is not l'shem mitzvah. I'm just sewing it up. I look at the end and I'm like, I got so much strings left over. I'll just use that for tzitzis. I now hang tcheles, but the problem is, I didn't hang those threads. Those original threads that are hung were being sewed, not l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. So it's not considered a maisa mitzvah. When is the maisa mitzvah being done? When you hang the tcheles. That's called tasa v'lo menachos. Tasa v'lo menachos means that there has to be a maisa mitzvah, and then you mekayim the mitzvah. Over here, I sewed it up shaloi l'shem mitzvah. This is not a classic version of tasa v'lo menachos. Tasa v'lo menachos is a classic version. We'll actually see in a moment. But basically, the cheshbon is I sew up the fourth corner. Not thinking mitzvahs at all, just thinking, just got to sew it up. I see all this hanging thread that's linen, because I used a linen needle, and I'm like, instead of snipping it off, I'll just use that. Grab my two tcheles, wrap it up, not realizing that it's not a mitzvah tzitzis, because I didn't have in mind when I tied it up. So it's not a aseh dechaloitzah, because it's no aseh, because I'm not making the mitzvah. So that's the concern.
What about the sample?
No, we're done with that. We're done with that, because that we could just rely on people sending letters. This is the new concern. So it says the Gemara, again, this is not the classic Tassel Women also. Tassel Women also usually means that once the mitzvah is done, then all of a sudden, like the mitzvah and the ma'aser are happening at the same time. We'll get to that in a second. This is just basically saying you did not sew it up, l'shem mitzvahs, tzitzis. So it says the Gemara, and Shar Rav Zer l'sadine. Rav Zer, when he heard this, he took the tzitzis off his linen beged. Meaning when he heard this, he was like, okay, good point. Took it off. Now, before we address this decree, one more. Rav Zera Amar Gzera Mishum Ksus Laila. Okay, meaning this is a good point. You're only. Let me ask you a question. What if you put tzitzis on your pajamas? Are you chayiv to put tzitzis at night on your beged? Meaning, pajamas are not chayiv in tzitzis. We'll define pajamas later on. It's either any beged at night or pajamas even during the day. Okay, but there's a concept that not all begadim are chayiv and tzitzis. Or let's assume there's no chayiv tzitzis at night. So think about it. If you put tcheles on your linen beged, it is a mitzvah, and it's perfectly allowed to wear it because asay docholosa say until nighttime comes. Because the second nighttime comes, I'm no longer mechayiv and tzitzis at night. Well, now I'm just wearing wool and linen unnecessarily. So because of that, they outlawed it. I mean, that's a pretty easy to understand. Okay, the Gemara says like this. Let's just go a little bit weiter. New topic, and then we're going to come back to the tassel of Menachos stuff in a second. Okay. Leather is not chayiv and tzitzis. Leather is not a beged. Meaning, even if you say that a beged is wool or linen or silk or whatever, leather is not a beged. Here's the question. We actually had this in Mishnah Berurah Yomi recently. What if you have a beged where it's partially leather, partially non-leather? Is it a leather beged and potter or not? I mean, how do you define a beged? So the question basically is like this. You have the ikar beged and you have the corners. What if the ikar beged and the corners are not made of the same material? One is obligated and says one's not. Is it defined by the ikar beged or the corners? So it says the Gemara to Machlekes. He shall beged. If the garment itself is made of cloth, which is chayiv, but the corners are made of leather. The corners are leather. So the question is, do you go by the ikar beged? Let's say the ikar beged is cotton. Chayiv. Or wool, whatever. Ikar beged is wool, chayiv. Corners are leather. So it says, you go by the ikar beged, not the corners. He shall bekanfel shall beged. But the opposite. What if the ikar beged is leather and the corners are wool, betura? Because my time ikar beged be'inan. Rav Shita is, you always go by the ikar beged, not the corners. Rav Acha disagrees. He says, basal kanaf. He says, no, you go by the corners, not the ikar beged. Good. Two more topics. And then we're going to finish up. Amr Rav Schar Amr Rav Huna Hitil Labal Shalish V'Hishlim La'arba. Okay, basically it's like this. I have 3 corners already done of the beged. I'm in the middle of sewing. I have not done the 4th corner yet. Am I chayiv in tzitzis? No, it's not a four-cornered beged. I put tzitzis on three corners before the fourth corner is even made. So that's not considered a maisa mitzvah, right? Putting on three corners when there's no fourth corner is not a maisa mitzvah. Then I sew the fourth corner and I put the tzitzis on, is no good. Why? Because the second, that's called tasav le'minaseh. Tasav le'minaseh means that you need the item to be chayiv, and then do it. Doing it before the chayiv kicks in doesn't help. I gave an example recently. You need a doorway with posts and a lintel on top. Now it's chayiv. Then you put a mezuzah. If I make a mezuzah on the floor, I take a piece of wood, another piece of wood, I drill it together, I put a mezuzah, and then I just stick the whole thing on the wall. That's not chayiv. Why? Because that's called tasav le'minaseh. You need the chayiv then to do the maisa mitzvah. Over here, you have a three-corner beged. It's not mechuyev yet. You put the tzitzis on the three-corner beged. It's not a maisa mitzvah. You do the fourth corner, then all of a sudden it's happening at once. That's called tasav le'minaseh. So says the Gemara, you put tzitzis on a three-corner beged, and then you completed it with a fourth corner. Meaning, you added the fourth corner afterwards. It's no good. Why? Psul, it's puzzle. You need a four-cornered beged, then put tzitzis on it. You can't put tzitzis on it while it's not a four-cornered beged. It's not considered a ma'aseh mitzvah.
I'm trying to verbalize it. The fourth one, you put the fourth corner on, now it becomes chayiv. You've done three, not the shameless tzitzis.
Correct. So
now, you haven't completed your ma'aseh. Now you're chayiv, and you finish it off with the shem mitzvah on the fourth one.
So it doesn't work, because by the time I thought about that. It shows you need to do all of them when it's mechuyev. Meaning all corners need to be done when it's mechuyev. Correct. All corners need to be done once the chiyuv is already triggered. So you need a four-corner beged then to put it on. But if you put it on, Josh, you mind grabbing the back door? Sorry, it's Carlos. Says the Gemara, so I have a kasha. Chasidim harishayim kivan she'argu b'shalish hayimatilim batchelas. The Brisa says the Chasidim harishayim, when they had 3 finger lengths, they would put on the tzitzis. Now, the simple way to read this, it implies, is basically they would put on the tzitzis before the beged was even done. They were so excited, l'sheim mitzvah tzitzis, that the second they had a corner, put it on. And the second they had a second corner, put it on. And the second they had a third corner, put it on. So you see this Brisa says that that's what the Chasidim harishayim used to do. So actually, tell me Tasal Lemon also, I thought that this is what they used to do. So says the Gemara, no. No. They didn't put each corner as they did it. Of course not. What the Brisa means is, let's say they do all 3 corners. They get to the fourth corner. They finish the fourth corner, but they're getting, when you finish a beged, they would have like a little bit of a boundary, or a little you do the finishing touches. They would put the tzitzis before the finishing touches. Not that they would put the tzitzis on each corner when they would do it. Of course not. They would finish all 4 corners. But as they were getting to the fourth corner, there's still a little bit of finishing touches. They would do the mitzvah even before the finishing touches. So there's no sheikhs to our discussion. Okay, just to finish up with this next Gemara is a little bit tricky because there's so many Gesars and Rashi. But Bekitzer, we've now created a Tasa V'Leimina Asoi. We have 2 different versions of Tasa V'Leimina Asoi. We have Tasa V'Leimina Asoi by sewing up. We've seen it twice today's daf. One is where you're sewing up the fourth corner with a linen thread, not l'shem mitzvah tzitzis at all. The thread is now hanging down, and you say to yourself, I'll just use that. So we said it's possible because it Tasa V'Leimina Asoi, but again, that version, it wasn't sewed up l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. Then we had a second version where I'm putting on 3 corners when I only have 3 corners. Obviously, the shem mitzvah tzitzis. I'm not a crazy person. I'm doing the shem mitzvah tzitzis, but still Tasa V'Leimina Asoi, because it wasn't, the chiyuv was not, I did the maisa before the chiyuv was ready. The Gemara feels that that's a bit of a chiddush to say Tasa V'Leimina Asoi in that version. Even though, by the way, between us, that is the classic version of Tasa V'Leimina Asoi. Like, Tosfos is bothered by this. If you're familiar with like Masechah Sukkah, they have Tasa V'Leimina Asoi mamish like that, where it's like you have a thing of straw, and then you hollow it out, and all of a sudden, now you have a schach. Tasa V'Leimina Asoi. That's obviously Shem Mitzvah Sukkah. So classic Tasa V'Leimina Asoi is this, but for some reason the Gemara is like, that's not Tasa V'Leimina Asoi. I mean, the Gemara wants to say that Tasa V'Leimina Asoi perhaps does not apply when you're doing l'shem mitzvah tzitzis. The Gemara says, I'll prove it to you. Is this a problem, Tasa V'Leimina Asoi, when you're doing l'shem mitzvah tzitzis? Rav Zera say, Hitel Milutelas Kshera. Let's say I have 4 corners, yeah? I have my talis, okay? But I look at this corner, and I'm like, these are brown. I need new ones. So what should I do? I should cut off the tzitzis and put in new ones. I decide, no. I'm going to put a whole new corners on, and then I'll cut off the old one. So I put on a fifth when the fourth was there. So and I'm doing l'shem mitzvah, and what's the halacha? It's kosher. But wait a minute, why isn't that tasav leminasai? When you put on the fifth one, it's not kosher, because now it's too much. Then when you cut it off, all of a sudden, it's done. Meaning it's happening at it's the same time, and that's classically a problem. So Amar Rava, Hashabal Taisiv Kai Maisa Lehava. That's not called Tasav Leminasai. Tasav Leminasai means that you did the Maisa before the Chiyuv. Over there, because it's Bal Taisif, it's hard to understand exactly what this means. The way Taisif explains it is that because it's Bal Taisif, because you added a fifth corner, it's Bal Taisif, it's not considered a Maisa at all. And the Maisa is the removing. Meaning, it's only a problem when you did a Maisa before the Chiyuv was Chal. It's not considered a Maisa because it's Bal Taisif. The way Taisus' Lashon is, I'll just read you Taisus' Lashon. It's a very short Taisus. Taisus says, this is Divrei HaMaschol, Bal Taisif Koi Maisa Lehava. Dekivan to Avad Isura, Loi Choshev Asiyah. Because it's an Isser, it's not considered an act. Ubeshas Ktsitza Harishonim Zu Asiyasa. The act is the cutting away of the old ones, and that's considered a Maisa. This is where it's tricky to understand exactly what the problem is, and that the Gemara understands that it's a problem of Tasav Leminasai because you're adding the fifth corner, which now renders it puzzle. Yeah, now it's puzzle. And because it's puzzle, it's now, right, it's not considered a Maisa Mitzvah. Then when you cut it off, it's now kosher, but you didn't do a Maisa Mitzvah. Right? Tasav Leminasai means that when you made it kosher, it was not with a Maisa Mitzvah. The Maisa Mitzvah was before, and then it became kosher without a Maisa Mitzvah. Tasav Leminasai. Like, you're hollowing out a sukkah, okay? When all of a sudden, when you're done the Maisa, all of a sudden, but you didn't do a Maisa, and all of a sudden there's schach there. I didn't make the schach just was formed. So the Gemara over here also, you put the fifth corner in, it's now puzzle, and then when you cut it off, it's Tasav Leminasai. The Gemara says, no, the cutting off is the Maisa. Meaning, you have five, it's a puzzle. The same way I could hang I puzzled it the same way I could hang on the corner and kosher that way. I cut it off that way. And the Gemara just ends off with this: Maskara Papa, Mimai de Gavra la Suvika Machaven, Dilmula Vatulika Machaven, V'chol Taisif Leka Maisa. The Gemara says, why do you assume that when he puts on the fifth one, his intention is to puzzle it? Maybe his intention is to add to it. Maybe his intention is to nullify the original tzitzis, which, by the way, means that is considered a Maisa. So now that's the Maisa, not the cutting away. So perhaps cutting away should be a problem. All right, we'll stop there. Pick it up tomorrow, B'ez Hashem.
So I gotta think this through a little more again.